We're now going to watch the recording of the interview we had with some of our leaders in V61. And Viv and I, we wanted to just simply listen and posture ourselves as learners. You see, the events of these last few weeks are not new, and it's not like a standalone situation. Numerous black people have been murdered by police. But for whatever reasons, the murder of George Floyd has brought deeply held frustrations. And around the world, there's this awareness of evil. Around the world, it's shaking at the moment. And the reality of racism has been brought to the head. And we just need to pay attention. Paul's letter to the Corinthian church describes the body. And when one part of the body is hurting, we all hurt. The whole body is hurting, and we're hurting right now. And what is true is that racism is evil. It should have not any place in society, and it certainly shouldn't have any place in the church.
But, you know, we've got a lot to learn. Steve and I have blind spots, and many of us who are white, we don't realise that what we say or what we don't say or what we do or what we don't do inadvertently wounds others. So this recording, it was slightly longer than we'd anticipated, but it's probably just over an hour. But we were going to edit it down, but there's just so much powerful talk between us that it was just too difficult to edit down. So please watch, listen, reflect on their words and their wisdom and their pain that that everybody's talking about today.
We just wanted to gather some of the people in our church community, just to speak candidly and openly about their feelings, particularly in the recent weeks and longer than that, years, decades, hundreds of years. This goes back, and the impact of racism to you personally, but also just giving our viewers an opportunity to learn, to be challenged, and to navigate together vulnerably during this time. And so Viv and I just want to position ourselves as listeners, and we're just going to let you all speak, and we want to hear your voice. And so just really to kick it off, anyone can jump in here, but just what are the feelings that you've had since the death of George Floyd? What are those feelings that have stirred up for you, recognizing that this might be one of many incidents?
For me, I'd say sort of pain in the first instance, and sort of anger. I guess the source of that is sort of a number of levels. One, the sort of pain of kind of re-experiencing the sort of silenced sort of frustrations that I've experienced, and many of us, I'm sure, have experienced in the past. You being to re-experience experiences of racism, or just feeling invisible, feeling excluded. And so this is all now coming to the fore. And then a sort of anger around, well, why now? You know, sort of, there's been so much that's happened, and then sort of why now? And I guess where my feelings are kind of settling at, although I suspect there's more to come, is a kind of a mixture between sort of an expectation to say, wow, God, you're clearly moving in this. This feels like a watershed moment. This is such an opportunity. And trying not to be sort of resentful anyway, and being okay sharing my experiences without feeling that this is just a moment that's going to pass. Because I think there's a concern where you feel like, well, this is great for social media, but is that going to translate into a shift in attitudes, behaviors, and policies and things like that? So I guess, yeah, gone from sort of pain, anger, to kind of curious to see where it's going to go.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like this weird confused place between resentment and shock, like with the George Floyd situation, like resentment and resignation, like just like, okay, this stuff happens all the time, but whoa, this was so shocking. And I don't know what the amalgamation of those two feelings are, but that was where I was at when it first happened. I couldn't watch the whole video through. I just had to just scroll through to the end, because when I see something like that, it feels personal, because I think of my husband or somebody that I know, and that could have been. So it feels even more shocking. And I don't know how much more shocking a visual like that can be, but it feels like I know that person, and a person that I personally know has been murdered. And it was, yeah, really hard.
Karen, why don't you describe some of those feelings as well?
For me, it was, yes, initially like shock that, is this really happening before our eyes? Like, is this man literally kneeling on him for 9 minutes as he's crying out for his mum? It was just, yeah, again, being a black person, I felt that could have been my brother, one of my family, and just the hurt, it was just felt so painful to watch. And then, yeah, anger, like, it was just felt so relentless. Like, the amount of cases over the last 3 weeks, it was like, this can't be happening now. We've just had a man, like the jogger that got shot, and then Breonna Taylor, and I'm like, this is just too much. It just felt like, whoa. And then just anger as going through social media and seeing more videos of just the way black people are treated and how they're approached, and it was just too much. And I not made a mistake, but I watched a documentary the next day. I started hearing about it on Friday, and Saturday I watched documentary 13th, and that just kind of opened my eyes even more, because I've been buried my head in the sand about it, I think, before. But yeah, and it's just felt so much rage and anger that is still happening today. And yeah, I'm calming down, but now it's about action now. Like, what can we do to really make change and to ensure that it's not just another thing that we hashtag and then we go back to normal. We can't go back to normal after this. That's how I feel. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else want to just share some other feelings that they've had?
Kind of nudged me. I guess maybe I'll make a little speech, because I thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I do it as a mixed race person. One of my colleagues today said to me, so how do you feel as a black CEO? But then my staff in Uganda and Kenya call me white. And so I'm coming from someone who's really, everyone knows that I'm not the same as them. That's typically the experience. And I'm operating in the world of law and academia and international development and charity. They're all dominated by white people. It's harder to get ahead if you're brown in these areas. So I think I'm very used to keeping white people happy and biting my tongue and being appropriate. And so like, I didn't even know how I'd come into this conversation because so many feelings started bubbling up. And I think thinking about what we saw in America, I think since white people set eyes on black people, they've been brutalizing them. Like, it's what what I saw didn't shock me, because that's what's been happening for centuries and centuries. That's the history of interaction between white people and black people. It's like I can't see how anyone can be surprised, because that's how America was built, on the backs of black people. That's how the West Indies were built. That's where Britain's wealth came from our empire. For centuries and centuries, white people have been beating and killing and burning and raping black people. And so I thought, well, why is this a shock to anyone? This is normal. In America, it's normal to see these images. I don't think it's hidden anywhere. As the church, when black people started coming to the UK in big numbers, the church said, you don't belong here. You're not welcome. You're not part of us. Living in London, an incredibly diverse city, but racism plays out every day. I think about it operating in the courts, and how for the same crimes we punish black people more harshly for exactly the same things than white people. When it comes to recruitment, if you have a name that doesn't sound white British, it's harder. Getting into university, so I guess I've been overwhelmed with emotion, because this plays out in all of our lives, and we might make this PG for our children, but why don't we learn about these things in school? Why aren't we taught anything about slavery in school, or about the empire, or about where we come from? Where's blackness celebrated? Where's black excellence celebrated? Why is it not celebrated in the church? Where are we celebrating black people? Yeah, I guess I've just been overwhelmed by my feelings, in part because I'm used to just fitting in and not rocking the boat. I don't know what it's like for others here, but we just have to navigate operating in London as much as it's diverse. And I saw that 40% of, looking at Wikipedia, 40% of Londoners are brown. That's not reflected in our church. It's definitely not reflected in our church leadership. If we look at our church's podcast, Hannah's nudging me again, sorry, I'll finish there. But it's also not reflected in the voices we hear in church. And that's me.
Thank you. Matt, Joey.
Yeah. A lot of emotions. I think I've probably plateaued in emotions, really. So I'm just like, I'm just flatlining throughout the whole thing, because I think as a black person, since I came out the womb, you're conditioned with survival mechanisms in how to operate in this world where you will inevitably encounter discrimination, you'll be ostracized, you'll be attacked. And so my earliest memories of walking home with my granddad from nursery is him feeding in spiritual things, and at the same time, the reality that I am a black man and I'm going to face certain things. And so when you're 3.5 years old, and that's the fundamental education you're receiving in order to survive, because of his experiences and his children's experiences, it means that there's a resonance with these things that kind of taps deeper than that's a horrific killing. And so when I see the figure of, there's so many things that are represented in the police brutality and in this specific murder, the image of a person in authority who happens to be white, with zero empathy and regard for life, and that person is the embodiment of generations of the same story, as Alex has already communicated. I think you're not surprised, you're horrified, but you're not surprised. I think the surprise has come in that it's almost as that the seed of this injustice has been sown for so long that it's germinated to a point where every black person around the world has an identifiable shared experience with this, can picture themselves or their family in that situation. I think even for me on a personal level, I've seen that picture. So I've seen bouncers outside of nightclubs with 2 bouncers on the back of a black guy who got angry because he was denied entry into a club, or police officers with beating someone at the side of the street and us being pushed back, that we're told we're not allowed to intervene. And, you know, the white people can step as close as they can, but if a black person steps forward, it's an aggression and they're pinned down or pushed against a car. So I think even in just this specific, that short video that was shown, I could name people that I could replace in that picture. And so I think for me, there isn't a surprise. And I think all the usual things of disgust and anger, and of course we experience that, but I think it just gets to a point where there is a collective sense of enough is enough. We can't just survive and receive ill treatment. We can't just be on the receiving end of this. There has to be change. And I think we as a people have been petitioning it so long, and I think it's been more blatant in America, and I think that's hard for people to comprehend and understand when drawing the comparison to here. But it's not like we've not been saying this or trying for a long time, and it's been under different terminology to allow those people in power to understand. We've talked about diversity, we've talked about representation. It's like, how many times do we need to rebrand and reword this thing that we call equality and justice? Yeah, so that's all I'll say. I think those are my initial feelings around the whole thing.
Yeah. Many of you said about just you're used to having white people keep you down, and just some of those images that you could replace them with either yourself or your own family members. I just love to hear a bit more about that. Like, where does that come from? A bit more about why is there that imposed image of individuals that you know that could be George Floyd?
I just say I think it's probably more the kind of, just from obviously from my point of view, like the empathy of the understanding of what that really means. Like, I think even for myself, I can still I could see Matt within that position, or a friend, or even many of the young people that I've ever been an advocate for any of the circumstances that they've been in and the injustices that they've felt. I think it's it's the empathy that you sort of switch the position of that person, because you know the injustice, you know the anger that they felt in situations that they've been in, and before, certainly what I felt when I saw those images.
I think the reason why we can see our brothers or father or in that position is because they literally don't care who you are as a black person. They don't find out whether you've even committed the crime. It's just basically your skin color. You don't have to have done anything. So that's why it could be any black person anywhere in the world, because it's not based on what you've done. You haven't committed a crime. You just stopped because of you're black, basically. So it could be any of our family members.
I think it takes a toll, people jumping to conclusions about you, knowing nothing about you. And I think about it as a magistrate. And the first time I went to visit prison, I sent people to, I got locked up there by the prison officers because they couldn't believe I wasn't one of the prisoners and that I was a visiting magistrate, because you don't see young brown men who are magistrates. Or I was thinking about applying to study history at Oxford, and I got A-star GCSE in history. I got 300 out of 300 in history AS level, I couldn't have done better, but the head of history had to back you. And he said, oh, I'm not sure that I'd back your application. I couldn't have done any better. I don't think anyone in my school had done better. He didn't know me, but he immediately had an opinion on me. And I think that happens again and again and again. I think that takes its toll.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me personally, I feel like I've been on a bit of a journey over the last week in particular. I guess from my perspective, I feel like I live in London. It's a very multicultural city. I don't personally feel racist, but I'm sure there's all sorts of biases and white privilege within me. And I feel like, I think if I'm totally honest, I kind of look at what's happening in the US and think that's not happening here. We live in London. This is a multicultural city where I don't see racism. And I think my ignorance and my naivety has really come to the forefront over the past week, really, of just thinking, just hearing people's stories and hearing that this is the lived reality of people on a day-to-day basis, isn't just like one-off. And so I guess I'd just love to hear just what you see on a regular basis, and just help us understand that, because from what I've heard over the last few days in particular, it is here and it's not just out there. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about that.
It's like picking out the stories, isn't it? I was thinking about it earlier, and I think there's like levels to the lived experience, like of feeling the lived experience. I think for me, on a base level, it's the feeling of otherness. Like I walk into spaces and I feel other, and I'm treated as an other. I feel an other when I come to church, and there isn't anyone that looks like me, or I walk into, say I'll just use church as an example. Potentially, there's no one, people that don't look like me, and there are conversations happening, just lovely conversations happening between people, but maybe I might come into that conversation and potentially maybe spoken to in a different way, because maybe people treat me as an other, so maybe I might not appear to be as educated or something, and so maybe people might use simpler words for me, and I'm like, I know big words too, and it's not, I'm not picking out church. It just, like, the feeling of otherness is a base level feeling, living in London, the UK. And then there are, I suppose, obstacles to just achieving the regular things that we all do. I can give an example of looking for somewhere to live, a rented property. And I know that when we tried to do that quite a few years ago, we were just going after property, just like applying as you usually do. You call up and then, I'm really interested in this property, is it still available? Yes. And then they want to take all your details, and then they're taking your details and they will get back to you, and then they get back to us, sorry, it's gone, it's not available. And you're like, oh, it literally just went on. Okay. And it happens over and over again. And there's the usual reasons why that could happen. But then also on that list, on every Black person's list of reasons why things happen, is maybe it's because I'm Black. So then you test it and you go, okay, I'm not going to use our married name, Temowa, Nigerian. Let me just use my maiden name for the initial part of it. Hi, I'm Bianca Rose. And then maybe when we get a viewing and you have to fill out the whole form, we have to put our name. So I'll do Bianca Rose. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. When would you like to come and see the property? Yeah, the viewings are happening on Saturday. These are the times. I'm like, oh, okay, that's the thing. So there's those sort of obstacles. And then there's overt racism. Last year, my oldest daughter, she's in year 2 now. And I found out when we were coming home in the car, picked her up, found out that she'd been being called a monkey by a classmate. And I asked loads of questions, thought it was like cheeky monkey, kids playing, interrogating the situation, found out it wasn't that, and that she had actually been called a monkey for a year prior. And I was so hurt that it was happening, but also hurt that she didn't tell me. Finding out that I said, why didn't you tell a teacher? You know, the usual things. And she said, I did. And the teacher told me to ignore it. And my oldest, Ava, she's so compliant. She will listen to the teacher and she'll just do what any adult tells her to do, you know. And also, it wasn't said with menace, like you're a monkey. It was more taunting and teasing, kind of monkey, and running off. So she thought it was just like, you know, kids tease each other. So it didn't register. She was 5. It didn't register in the way that it would have registered for us as an adult or a Black adult. So she listened to the teacher and said nothing for a whole year until my youngest started in reception and the child called her that. So when my usual interrogation in the car, what did you do for school? What did you eat for lunch? What did you eat for your break? Who did you play with at lunch? Did you have fun? What was the best time of your day? I thought they mentioned this story. This child's calling, my youngest, this girl was calling me a monkey. I'm like, what? And I tried to not make it a big deal. And then my oldest was like, yeah, she's been doing that to me, saying that to me for the whole of year 1. And so, you know, it was dealt with very, very swiftly at the school, and it was confirmed that it was race related. And so there are those instances where there is in your face racism. These things happen all the time. There's just, in my life, there's levels to it, but I generally walk around feeling other.
Just to build on some of the points that sort of Bianca made, I think some people listening may think, so just with regards the sort of housing and the sort of application of, you know, trying to buy or rent a house, there's some research that was done where there was a sort of A/B testing where they tested different people with giving different names and actually validated that actually if you have a certain surname, you are sort of disadvantaged when it comes to being able to access sort of property. But also, for me, you know, Bianca was talking about those sort of extremes from sort of explicit overt racism to kind of what seems innocuous. And actually, people might think, oh, it's the overt racism that's the big thing. For me, my experience is it's more the feeling of being invisible, feeling like a second-class citizen. Just basic things like I never forget growing up, and I don't know how many of you can attest to this, depends on what your surname's like, but I'd have a call with the bank. I'd spell my surname very clearly, and then I get Tamonga or something, just completely different. I mean, where did you get that from? I mean, my name couldn't even sound like that. And then you speak to someone else and it's just, you spell it out. I mean, I know some people might be listening thinking, gosh, yeah, I've got a strange surname, I'm not Black. Fair enough, this isn't unique to the Black experience, but it just adds to that feeling of feeling like sort of a second-class citizen. Or I was at work and when I was in a consulting firm, and one of the women on project was walking towards me and started talking to me about this project. I had no idea about this project. I don't know what she was talking about. So yeah, so you know, when we go upstairs for this conversation, this is what I want you to do. And I said, do you mean me? Because I don't know what you're talking about. And she looked at me and said, oh, sorry, I thought you were Mac, a good friend of mine who's also Black. I look nothing like him. He's mixed race. And she just confused me. And I thought, how does that happen? And, you know, so I mean, I'm sure maybe, you know, there's a Black person who's mixed up a white person or whatever. So, but certainly I'm just sort of giving those examples to say you can often, there's the sort of extreme racism, but there's the sort of seemingly innocuous things where you just feel like a second-class citizen and you just feel a bit invisible.
It makes me think of going for a pupillage interview as a barrister, and one of the questions asked me was, so do you come from a broken home, and why didn't you become a drug dealer or join a gang? And I knew in that situation, there's nothing I can do. This is how the profession operates. And I can't take this to anyone because no one will listen, and it won't help me to get pupillage anyway. And that's just what it is. We have to dance to a different tune if we want to try and get halfway as far as people who don't look like me.
I think as well, I think there's different, when we talk, I know that question, like, is racism here in London? I think we've become comfortable with racism being an enemy as a concept when it's in a weaponized form. So football hooliganism, we can empathize with that. We're like, no, that's a couple instances in the stadium, couple people that have been brought up wrong, all that kind of stuff. We're a tolerant society. We hear that in the media. There's no place for racism. Stamp it out, all that kind of stuff. Okay, and I think for the majority of the population, they feel like, oh, we've done racism. We got rid of it. Like the England football team, Raheem Sterling, and it's dealt with. It's done. What we're not addressing is the home, so our education, and how the story of our nation, which is why I think instances like Windrush was such a shock for people. My granddad came over Windrush, so I'm second generation Black British, West Indian parents, born here. And he came to London in a time where, it's one of the first Black families on his street in Brixton. You can't imagine that now, where the signs were no Blacks, no Jews, no Irish, no dogs. And so in order to protect his children, like I mentioned earlier, and then my parents educating me, that's the kind of shared narrative that we have, that there's survival tactics we have to employ to be accepted in society. And so the thing that is more prevalent is this systemic thing that we're talking about, which is in structures and constructs, in systems, and we talk about that a little bit, banking, government, things like that, opportunity. And I think that's the thing that plays out far more subtly, as opposed to the American experience, which we're seeing a lot more, is a lot more visceral, a lot more physical, and has been across other nations as well at different periods of time, where we have that really visual symbol of.
Sorry.
And so I think the instances that we see here, I mean, I was talking to Steve about it, but it plays out almost every day when, when Joey's working, the example I gave you, and it's me and Ciela out for a walk or in the supermarket, and the comment is, oh, is it your day with your daughter? Because obviously Black men with a young daughter are single, they're not together with a woman. Like, I knocked someone up and I'm just having her for the day because that's the only reason I would take care of a child by myself. Or, and I think, and that's a personal instance, but the subtleties that I've experienced in business, in the creative work that I do, where I submit an idea, and because I submit the idea, it's potentially too Black an idea. Got nothing, even if there was a single Black person involved in it, but because it came out of my mouth. And then someone that they've previously worked with before, another agency, another artist, presents the exact same brief and idea, arguably more because they feel the need to toe the line of equality, bring in all these different faces and colors. And they'll even acknowledge, oh yeah, Matt had that idea, but we'll go with you because, Matt, your thing's probably too culturally, too whatever. So I've seen it in the church. I've seen it where I'm apparently bringing the wrong culture. And I think that's another thing that we probably need to be aware of, that when we talk about multicultural, when it comes to the church context, it's rare that we have multicultural churches. We have multiracial churches, but not multicultural churches. There's usually a culture. And if you're not that culture, depending on the leadership of the church, it's very hard to accept, to invite, to dissimulate that authority and trust amongst people that may not automatically fit your culture. And often even the basis of culture is based on comfortability. It's not actually even a true culture. So I think for me, like when we're talking about all these things about almost a systemic nature of racism, and is it here in London? It definitely is. It's everywhere. I think the thing that's more dangerous that we're tired of is we've seen the images for thousands of years, hundreds of years of white people beating black people and things like that. I think the thing that we're tired of is it's a story of generations that are still alive today, or their legacy is still alive today, and we're experiencing it. And our children, fourth generation, third, fourth generation, are going to be stepping into that world. And that's why it feels like in London, enough people are now saying, do you know what, enough is enough. And we can talk about Gen Z and all that kind of stuff, who are far more mobilized by activism and have a global awareness. And so it's very easy to engage, very easy to mobilize, very quick to rally around a central message. And I think, yeah, I think it's an issue in the UK. And I think it's on more levels than just this weaponized racism that we can blame on parties, the KKK, the BNP, the football hooliganism and things like that. That's when we talk about things happening every day, rather than I'm getting, things thrown at me in the street every single day. It's much more subtle than that.
I think many people in church will have voted for the Conservatives, who said they want this country to be a hostile environment to illegal immigrants. As a government, they're going to exist to make a certain group of people suffer. Their plans and intention is to make life really hard for people here. I wonder how that penetrates our thinking, how it makes us jump to conclusions about people who look or their names sound different from us. If the government's saying, well, yeah, they don't belong, they need to go back. And each of us has to play a part in enforcing that, if we are landlords or employers, checking whether people belong or not. I wonder how that plays out in our decisions.
I just wanted to share another story that came to mind. I have a couple, but I'll just share one more. And it's not my own story. It's a story that wouldn't otherwise have been shared wouldn't otherwise have been shared publicly. It would have been shared amongst us Black people, but it wouldn't have been shared on social media because we just don't really do that. And a friend of mine, she's a singer, she's awesome, sung with pretty much anyone you can ever think of. She shared on her stories a couple of days ago that she was walking in Crystal Palace, where she lives, and I think she was walking home, and there was a young girl, a young white girl, I think she was on her bike, and I think she was around 5, 6, 7 kind of age. And as soon as the girl saw her, she screamed at the top of her lungs, "Mummy, N-word." Everyone knows what that is, at the top of her lungs in the street. And my friend was just shocked. She just was like, what? And she carried on walking, and then she came across the mum sitting on a wall. And the mum gave her such a sinister look, an intimidating look, as if to say, yeah, what are you going to do about it? And she just carried on walking. And she said, she's put on a story about 4 days ago. She said this happened to her last week. And I was shocked. I was like in the street in Crystal Palace, people are being called such names by young children who are being taught that by their families. So when we say that it's not here, like it really is. It's just we don't generally talk about it. We talk about it amongst each other. We know this is going on, but we don't, as Alexander said, we don't necessarily like to make other people feel uncomfortable, or we don't feel comfortable to be able to share, or we don't feel believed or seen, but we know this is what we are experiencing. Somebody said this quote of, when there's dust in the air, and it's obviously in the air, but you don't see it until the sun comes out, and then you can see all the dust that was always there. Like it was, this is there, but this moment is shining a light, and everyone is seeing it, and everyone is shocked.
Just quickly to specifically build on that, and so a few months ago I was talking about just identity piece and how we see ourselves. My family history goes back to, so there was a lady probably about 4, 5, 6, 7 generations ago, Sarah Forbes Bonetta, who was the kind of goddaughter of British monarchy. So I believe it was Queen Victoria. This is going back quite a long time. At that time, the Queen was known to gather a number of different children from the Commonwealth and sort of assign them the name sort of godchild. And so this, our family, my experience of, being alive has kind of revolved in many ways around this sort of understanding, certainly implicitly at least. And whilst Bianca was talking, it reminded me of a time when our eldest daughter came home and said, "Daddy, why can't I be white? I would like to be white." And I thought about that for a moment and thought, And I said, why is that the case? And well, everyone around me is white. Why can't I be white? And for people listening, if you've got children in particular, is that something you've ever had to experience? What would that be like if, your child said, actually I'd rather be brown or black, why can't I be that way? And you may not think that it's a massive issue, but again, it just speaks to this thing around white privilege where everything almost feels like it constellates around whiteness. You're at work and they're doing a video call. There's not really much lighting because it's set up for a lighter complexion. I was reading Channel 4, they were talking about setting up the audience for a camera shot, and the producer said, "Oh, it looks a bit dull in this part of the scene." That's where all the black people were sitting. And so again, when everything seems to revolve and constellate around kind of what it means to be white, one's existence can feel very strange and very odd much of the time. So I just wanted to sort of feed that into the conversation, really.
Thank you. Love to hear. Just as a white man, Anglo-Saxon family, where do we start? How can we educate ourselves? What do we need to learn during this time? Great. Next question.
I think you just need to look back at our history, because in the schools we're just taught, it's like we only evolved, we came from slavery basically. You don't hear about what we were before slavery, like we were kings and queens, and that's not taught. And everything's just wrong about how America was discovered. Like, you're not told what actually happened, that the Native Americans were there first. And I think just we're not shown, as Alex was saying, in a positive light at all. And just educate yourself on how it all started, like about slavery and how everything is set up against black people, keeping black people oppressed, especially in America, like mass incarceration, everything. Like, it's just so deep and it goes back so far. So I think just understanding that is a start. And then I don't know what's next, but definitely it feels like we're kind of tipping point, and change. I feel excited that things are going to change now. I just feel like enough is enough, and everyone seems to be like getting on the same page, and yeah, I just feel like change is around the corner, which is exciting.
Karen, thank you. Any other thoughts?
I don't think I can tell you how you can or why you should educate yourselves. I think, and Viv and I spoke about it yesterday, I think for me it's really interesting to start with why, and for you to reflect why this matters to you. And as you build this church, why it matters. And I think often it's easier to build things if we're just dealing with known entities, and to build in our own image, to build a staff team in our own image. It can be less challenging. Speaking to one of my in-laws who's interested in building churches, he said, well, it's educated 20 to 30-year-olds, that's where it's at, that's the future. They'll bring their families into church, they'll bring money into church. So I think starting with why is really important. And I guess I asked you the question at the beginning about being on both sides, because I think as Christians, there's only one side, not just for us as Christians, but as we look at anyone, because everyone's created in God's image. And I think that any community can flourish when every person within that community has an opportunity to flourish. And I think that very often my sense is in this country that if a brown person ends up in some position, the question could be, are they there because like it was necessary to show that brown people are given opportunities? Or just reading about it in the Times recently with some of the BBC's sports presenters, the older white men, and moving on, and opportunities being given to younger people, including some young brown people, and looking at the comment section of the Times Online and talking about how you have to have quotas and you have to have all these brown faces everywhere, and what was wrong with those who were already there and they were doing a great job. So asking, why does it matter? Why are these issues pertinent to us as a church? What difference does it make if people who aren't white get to show up more fully in Vineyard 61? Will that change anything? Will it change anything for the better? But I think that partly you get to that point through getting close to people and walking in their shoes and listening, and being challenged and getting really uncomfortable. And I think it takes time and perseverance. I don't think that there are many quick fixes.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think it's asking the questions, the why and who, the stuff that we're doing and the stuff that we say, who is it actually for? I think in the context of church, we talk about revival, we talk about transforming our communities. Do we have a person in mind when we say those things? Is our message actually full of integrity? And therefore, does that bring honor to God because we're worshiping him in spirit and in truth? So the things that we say, our offering of worship, does it actually hold integrity because we're speaking the truth? Because if we're not equipped to reach those people by not actually being able to empathize with them because we've not learned about those people, you wouldn't go into a mission without receiving a brief and doing your recon. And I think that if we're not acknowledging the people that we say we're trying to reach, it doesn't make sense when you're sitting there and you look around and it doesn't reflect the things that we're saying that we're actually about and the impact that we're trying to say that we have. And so I think in part those questions have to be asked, and I think again in a church context, we do have to even figure out how to say this without it feeling like I'm saying it so that people start to address themselves as, am I racist or not? Because that's not the question that's being asked. I saw someone message me and was like, there's been so much fallout recently from different leaders. I don't have to name them, different church leaders around London who have fumbled. And the effect of that is probably going to tear apart certain congregations. I've had conversations today and yesterday with people in certain levels of leadership under those people who are now saying, I can't actually be a part of this church anymore. And so there's questions being asked. And I think the one example, even, I know you brought up the BBC and sport, but even, you know, Justin Welby posted some stuff in response. And you 3 swipes through those comments, there's a lot of white profile pictures, and a lot of those comments are not happy with what Justin said. And there's a common thread, which is, I'm not racist, so don't tell me what to do. I don't want to learn. Nothing's broken here as far as I'm concerned. So don't play into this political game like the gospel is for every. And it's like, we're missing something here if there's people hurting and we're not actually able to model anything Christ-like by even drawing close. And I've seen it on Facebook. I've seen people that we all know deep in debate saying, well, if you're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, then you need to talk about abortions and babies. And it's like, you're missing something so biblically simplistic. You've complicated it with some strange doctrines, and the strange fruit that's being bared, which doesn't seem to have compassion, is incredibly dangerous. And it's really based out of a lack of understanding and a humbleness, a humility to be able to say, hey, people are hurting. I need to learn and understand. I need to jump in with compassion. And it's really costly. And so when we talk about many facets of what it means to be Christ-like, we really struggle with justice because it's costly, because we have to confront ourselves that we are privileged, because advocacy is built on that whole economy that I have to stand in the gap because I'm able to advocate for someone because of the sense of privilege or status or whatever, that these people will listen to me or stop or engage, and I can say on their behalf, hey, this is bad and this is wrong. And I think that means you have to confront your privilege, you have to confront your status, and a lot of people aren't really comfortable with doing that because the gospel's enough and revival's coming. And unfortunately, those things don't really help the beggar on the street. They don't really help the widow. They don't help the person that's been abused. They don't help the person who is oppressed and enslaved and in bondage. We don't just shout, Jesus saves, when the person's in chains.
Thank
So
you.
I think that's where we, yeah.
Thank you. Just on that, I'd love to hear just what we've touched on, our faith, and we've touched on the church, but I'd love to just hear what do you think Jesus is saying at this time, whether it's to you personally or to speak into this time, this season, whether it's to our church, whether it's to our city or beyond that as well. I'd love to just hear just what do you think Jesus is saying for this time.
I personally, Jesus has been saying a lot to me personally because he's had to help me work through this week. I felt like I have been challenged time and time again to not partner with the accuser, with the devil in accusing the hearts of people that I don't know. I don't know how people are responding to things online. I don't know how my white friends are feeling who are not necessarily engaging with something that's very, very painful for me. I've had to determine that I'm not going to accuse hearts, and I think God's been talking to me a lot about that and helping me a lot with that. And I asked God, I was like, look, we all have all these thoughts and feelings about how this should change, but you have the strategy that has the potential to like literally change the way we live. And I was like, Lord, what could that be? Such a big question, you know, and I don't feel like I in any way I've got a full answer, but I had a sense that like it's very powerful when I take up somebody else's cause, when I fight for somebody else. That is a big foundation of our faith. And as a Black person, we have been talking and fighting and shouting about this for centuries, you know what I mean? but what would it look like for this cause to be taken up by people who don't look like us? Like, we would never sit down and not fight for ourselves, but for en masse, for people to go, no, you guys, like, replenish yourselves, rest, like, we're gonna take this on because this is not on. As a church, as Christians, what would that look like if this cause was taken up by our brothers and sisters who don't look like us? I had that thought when I asked God, what would you do? What does this look like? What does change look like? I had that thought. I have loads of thoughts. I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you. I'd love to hear. Hannah, do you have any thoughts in this time?
As I've been thinking about it, and as I've been praying about it, and I've been listening to Alexander speak about it in the days that have gone by, the question that rings to me over and over again is, who is my neighbour? And the Bible talks about us loving the Lord our God with all of our heart and loving our neighbour as we love ourselves. And I think understanding who our neighbour is puts quite a lot into perspective for me. And I've been asking, God's been speaking to me about who my neighbour, who am I willing to really love as I love myself? Like, who is my neighbour? And for me, I just can't get past that, because I just think this is the word, this is Jesus. This is what Jesus, it's his instruction for living. And I just think that if I feel challenged to question who my neighbour is, and am I loving them as I love myself? That's as far as I've got in this at the moment, because that's a big question.
And he says that when we encounter those who are othered because of poverty or imprisonment or sickness, we encounter him. And I think that, Steve and Viv, you had us the first day we met you, because you invited us for a meal around your table. And around your table, we saw people from really different backgrounds and really different life experiences. And with some people wearing their struggle and their brokenness on the surface. I think for others, it's a little bit hidden. But we got a sense, actually, everyone can belong here. Everyone can be accepted. We can come just as we are. And I loved how you said that when you spoke to other people about church planting, they said that the way to grow a church isn't to go and look for those who are broken and hurting and struggling and to reach out to them. There's no strategy in that. That's not where the growth's at, but that's where your hearts were at. And that won us over, that won our hearts. And
that's Jesus.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know who's around your table now. We are at the moment, but I think that in proximity and proximity to those who are different and those who are in struggle and those who are aching, we encounter Jesus.
That's so many good things that are being shared. The question of what is God saying? I certainly don't have any sort of clarity, if you like, but I feel like this is a really humbling moment for all of us involved, actually. A humbling moment to ask ourselves, do we really take Jesus's words seriously? And it's a moving question for me, because when you read 1 Corinthians 13, all the answers are there, right? It's very clear. You couldn't get it any clearer. Love isn't easily offended, isn't puffed up, doesn't rejoice in kind of people falling over. Love isn't a douchebag, basically, right? And then you read other parts of the scriptures where it says, my house would be a house of prayer for many nations. And maybe some of that is the sort of, we live in the not yet and in between the now, and we know we will sort of see that realized in the new age. But actually, I think there's a call to say, do we really believe Jesus when he says, as Hannah was talking about, who's your neighbor? or are we happy in our cliques, and that applies to all different ethnic groups, black, white, in between. Are we sort of comfortable where we're at with the status quo? Or are we finally ready to say, look, Lord, we take you seriously. Either your word is true or it's a false. And if it's false, we should just go on and go and have fun and get drunk or whatever, right? And so I think this is a real, for me, it's a humbling call for us to sort of self-examine ourselves. Matt, I fully agree. Matt was talking about, the question isn't necessarily, are you racist? We're talking about allyship, talking about advocacy. Having said that, though, I think we have to be honest. We have to not be afraid of our brothers and sisters in the church being honest about their true feelings. I remember someone, I think it was someone from the SNP or something, some kind of Farage party or something like that. And the woman, you might recall on BBC, said, I don't know why, but when I go to certain parties, I just can't sit next to the black person there. I don't know why. I feel I can't really sit next to them. And people began to, and she was saying, I don't think I'm racist. I'm just being honest. And what I fear is that in the midst of everything that's going on, those honest voices will get pushed to the fringes, and instead they'll feel like they can't share that. And what I really hope is, as we pursue love, that we create space for grace for people to be completely honest, sensitive, yes, but honest about exactly what their experience is, so we can then begin to have a dialogue and invite the Holy Spirit to bring healing and to heal the wounds that exist. Because there are wounds in every sort of kind of community group, white, black, or brown. And yes, we are talking about the black community. However, I don't think we can seek healing for one community and not expect Jesus to heal the other, to not heal the other.
Wow. Wow. Thank you.
I think for me, I think I know we're talking about race today, but I just feel like this year has been the craziest year. I think it's like, I just think it's end times without making too much of a joke about it. Like, I think as much as I've tried to find a personal, rooting, comforting word from God around everything that's happened the past couple of days, especially, the reminder I get is more universal in terms of the timeline of things that have happened and are happening at the moment, that he's building his church, and that the things that we've been asking for a long time, maybe it's a case of us asking for the correct lenses to see how this could be a fulfillment of prayers and things that people have been praying for a long, long time. My granddad has been praying for. When we pray for the church to be one, did we really understand that in order for maybe that to happen, there was things within the system that needed to be break, that have been established from before anyone that looked like us was here? I think the narrative of everything that is happening at the moment, how we've been positioned to a place of confrontation by literally being locked in our homes, how we're more connected than ever, the things that we're sifting out of our lives, the things that are happening politically, economically, all of this stuff. As much as I want to be self-centered and focused, which I feel like I'm entitled to be with everything that's going on, the only thing I can think about is that he is building his church, that there's prophecies that are being fulfilled today still, that all the things that he has made available to us by his Spirit are still active and at work and available to us now. That if it's requiring a whole people to be healed, and that's the level of miracle that we're going to see from today, then that's something that's going to be undeniable across the globe, that could potentially transform everything, could expose the gospel in a way that we've never encountered before. Maybe this is a revival brooding that we've never seen the likes of before through all of this. I think as much as people saying enough is enough, that presents a new opportunity. And and an opportunity for real victory over what we could say is one of the most demonic things that has attacked us as a people, is, you know, in terms of division by pigmentation. I think it's an opportunity for something to happen that we've maybe never seen before. So my head's, as much as I'm like, you know, want that Abba Father thing and comfort, I can't escape the whole thing of there's more that's going on today. And that's not to like remove any kind of personal responsibility I have to disciple friends and be there and uphold these conversations and go deeper in scripture to have understanding of the kind of time that we're living in, and to be able to discern the narratives that we're exposed to every day, social media and things like that. It's not to kind of sweep that to one side, but I just can't escape that kind of more universal thing.
That's great.
I feel like we could chat all night and all next week, I imagine. I think what we're not wanting to do is just feeling like, great, well, that's it, we've had that conversation, let's tick that box, let's move on. I feel like, for me, I'm on the first rung of the ladder in some ways, in terms of talking about this and processing some of this with God and what it means for church and what it means for us. And we're so grateful to you guys for speaking into us personally, into our church culture. It's difficult to know how to end this for now, but I'm just wondering whether, can one of you pray, and we'll kind of stop this recording for today, but this is just the start, I guess, and just wanting to see the kingdom of God here as it is in heaven. And yeah, if somebody's willing and able to pray, that would be amazing.
Could I just make a brief comment before we do so? We're with you and we're for you, and we're glad to be part of the conversation. I think the conversation has a cost for us, and it's been a painful one for me. And I think it becomes really painful to have conversations and then not to see change. And then I think it can make us give up sometimes. I think we're resilient. There's a lot of resilience around here, but we're with you and we're for you, and we're on this journey with you. I'm thinking about the video for Sunday, and I'm thinking about how I try and create allyship between people who've never been in prison and prisoners, and taking a group of people to death row in Uganda once, and their interactions with the condemned people being filmed, and one of the death row inmates saying, "I don't want to be a poverty porn star." And I guess my hope for this conversation is that we're not just something to be looked at and listened to, and this is an interesting conversation to be observed from a distance. And I think if that happened, that would be a failure, because and I think it risks othering us further from the rest of the church, because conversations don't just happen in one direction. So we're with you. We're happy to. We are to be your thought partners and to accompany you, and there's nothing that is off limits. But I think that when it comes to bringing in the rest of the church and the purpose that this video plays, I think it's something that's worth thinking about.
Okay. Lord, well, thank you so much for this time. Lord, we sense a shift, and we believe that you're on the move. So we thank you for what you're doing. We acknowledge what we don't fully see or in any ways really understand. And we just ask that, Lord, you help us to walk with you through this change all the way to the end, that we will truly be people who, when the world sees us and the way that we love each other, then they will truly know that you are real. And so, Lord, help that to be our lived experience. Help that to be what we come to know, Lord. I pray, Lord, let that become our identity, that we are people who truly are known and know each other, and truly know how to love each other and to receive love. So we ask that you will seal everything in this conversation. We'll ask that that all the different moments that are shared will be and are heard will be things that inspire hearts to love, that we pray that there will be no condemnation over any hearer. Lord, there'll be no condemnation at all, but we pray, Lord, that that anything that is heard will be things that inspire more love, that break chains, that break bondages of minds and hearts, and that fill everybody with light and love and revelation, and pull people to deeper places with you and together as community. So Lord, just Holy Spirit, please attach yourself to every single word that is spoken, Lord, and let it just be more than every word just carries so much more weight, Lord. We love you and we thank you for being amongst us. In Jesus' name.
Just as Bianca was praying there, I just had a thought, and I just use
the other camera, do you know, the one that's there.
I just had a thought, and I was thinking about the passage. I think it's in Colossians 3, where it says, in Christ there is no Jew nor Greek, no Scythian, male nor female, that we are one in him. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to reflect on how maybe we've interpreted that in the church. Have we used that unwittingly or unintentionally as a way of sort of whitewashing everyone, as a way of sort of a kind of not seeing the uniqueness and the sort of diversity in amongst the unity. And we don't want uniformity, we want unity is often the phrase. And in that sort of unity, we've got a whole range of people. And I wonder if there's, as I was thinking about that, I wonder if there are other scriptures that we need to look at afresh in a new light, and to reevaluate how our theology has maybe driven and underpinned some of these our experiences, oppressive experiences, and the racism that we've been discussing. And so as not to end on a low, we have hope, and we trust and believe. We'll make sure we put that in there.
We'll cut that bit out.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
We could have talked all night with those guys, and it was such a privilege to hear, to learn, to continue to respond as listeners. And I've just had this opportunity over the last week and longer just to stop, rethink, begin re-educating myself, but also to ask God's Spirit to move us to personally, and just as we think and as we think about our church as well. I loved what Bianca said, that the dust, when the light shines, you see the dust in the air, and this is definitely a time where the light has come upon us and that there's dust in the air. And so we want to just continue these conversations, continue to be listeners, to see ourselves as listeners and learners. And I also loved what Matt says, that justice is costly and we need to look at ourselves. And this is just an opportunity to look at ourselves. And so we're going to carry on these conversations, really. As you can imagine, we haven't got a well thought out plan or strategy. We just want to go, we want to say personally, I just want to listen. I'm going to receive things that I don't like. I'm going to hear things that are going to provoke me, but I'm just going to position myself as listeners. And so we're just going to carry on during the week in our life groups, listening and praying together. In our Facebook community as well, we're going to just invite people to post some information, maybe podcasts, maybe videos, maybe some blogs, maybe some books, just as a way to continue to listen. But let me just read this. Just as the dust is in the air, the Lord is with us. And we absolutely need God to bless us. And so let me just read this blessing from number 7. We've been singing about it throughout the world, this song of blessing. Let me just read what it says in number 7. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And Lord, would you turn your face towards us and give us peace. Amen.